All financial support for this podcast comes from my patrons on patreon.com. If you'd like to join in with the patrons, please check out patreon.com/DarwinGrosse. That's DarwinGrosse. Now enjoy the podcast. Okay, today I have the great opportunity to speak to someone new to me. His name is Peder Simonsen, and he's a recording artist, composer, producer, engineer, practically everything you can imagine, based out of Norway. I have gotten a chance to sort of like immerse myself in both his music as well as the music of people that he's been producing. And it's just gorgeous. It's right up my alley. And so I'm very excited to speak with Peder. Hey, man, how's it going?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks a lot for taking time out of your schedule to have this discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be on.
Yeah. So I gave like the 2-penny tour of what all you do. Why don't you actually fill in the blanks? And like, I know you're involved in a lot of different groups, as well as a lot of different instrumentation work and stuff. So why don't you kind of tell us in your own words what your body of work is all about?
Right. Well, I'm very interested in music that works with tuning and time, repetition, and with space, I guess, like both harmonic space and also physical space. And it kind of all stems from my background as a tuba player. I'm originally educated as a jazz tuba player. For the last few years, I've been playing a lot of microtonal tuba, and I've gotten into just intonation and microtonal music, which has been now a long-standing interest and has opened up a lot of great collaborations and met a lot of interesting people in that world. And I've also been recording a lot of music and producing stuff. It's kind of all working together in a way, recording something and creating something, because to me, it feels kind of connected how you like portray a sound, or if you're recording a sound, you're portraying it, but you're also kind of choosing how to present it. So you're designing like the sound in the same way as if you're creating one on a synthesizer or producing one on a tuba, on a certain level at least.
Right. Now, I find it fascinating that you got your start in jazz tuba. Quite frankly, when I was younger, I didn't know such a thing even existed. But I went to school at University of North Texas, and Rich Madison was one of the instructors, and he was kind of like one of the early kind of bebop jazz tuba players. And I was really quite amazed by, what real facility on the instrument sounded like. What was it that drew you to the tuba in the first place? And then what is it about working with the tuba that led you into working with modular synths? That seems like a pretty big leap.
Yeah, well, actually, I started out playing in the local marching band when I was a kid, because my best friend wanted to start in the marching band because his older brother was. So it was kind of random. And as I started in the marching band, I don't know, I just wanted to have like a really large instrument. It looked really cool to me. And I tried it, and it just, it felt good right away. I got a sound, and almost all the kids kind of want to play drums or saxophone or whatever. So if you're a marching band director and you have a kid that wants to play the tuba, you're basically just throwing positive reinforcement of that kid. So,
Okay.
So that was kind of nice. And I mean, the tuba, it's an instrument that's kind of weird in the sense that, as you mentioned, you have like people who are amazing at that. But for me, it was, I didn't really know anything about that when I was playing in the marching band. But I had a teacher via the marching band who was called David Gald, who's still a tuba player in Norway today. And he was a jazz tuba player and still is a fantastic musician. And I didn't know until I was like 13 or something that he was good at music on that level. He was just teaching me to play like basic stuff. And then I'd gotten into like blues and improvisation, and that was kind of what kept me in music. It wasn't per se the fact that I was playing tuba, it was that music opened up in the sense that it could be freer and you could kind of connect what you were hearing and what you were imagining to your instrument. And it kind of could have been any instrument, but since I was playing tuba and he was a great jazz tuba player, I then got he set up all these great things for me, like getting me and my friends to have a little band and instructing us. And so that was like a big thing. And from that, music became kind of freer, because as you learn to improvise, then you connect your ear to your music creation. And it doesn't necessarily even become dependent on the instrument you're playing. It can be anything.
Yeah, so true. That's actually a really interesting point. It's no longer about replicating the notes on a piece of paper. It's more about getting what you hear in your head out of whatever instrument you happen to be using.
Yes. And I mean, improvisation can be so many things. And there are so many great improvisers who will be able to tell you like so much about that, what that process can encompass as you grow even more familiar with it. It doesn't have to be like improvisation in the jazz understanding of it, even though I mean improvisation has been around probably as long as music has, I would imagine. So it can mean anything. But I studied jazz tuba because I got very, very into jazz music. And then after a while, I didn't fall out of love with jazz music, but I felt kind of limited by what the tuba was normally doing in jazz music. Like, because with tuba, you would imagine more New Orleans jazz kind of stuff, or
Sure.
that kind of era. And I love playing New Orleans jazz. I still do sometimes, but it wasn't kind of connecting to the music I was listening to or the music I was interested in that was more experimental. But luckily, at the time, and there was a lot of great creative tuba players in Scandinavia that were doing other stuff and with electronics. And I started studying at this place called NTNU, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, that has like a jazz program at the conservatory. But they also have like a music technology program, and the teachers there go a bit back and forth. So I was able to then get a bit more into the technical side of stuff, like more effects or play tuba through pedals or whatever. Okay. And a lot of other tuba players were doing that there. And I guess that's around then when I was working with that, then I kind of fell out of love with the tuba for a while, because then I couldn't make it work with the music I was hearing at all. I had like started getting like a computer where I could use sequencers and I could program a bit of stuff. But in the end, it was actually getting the microtonal tuba that got me back into tuba, because then the tuba was suddenly connecting with how I hear music in a much more profound way. And so now I feel great about playing tuba, but now it feels like one part of what I'm doing. And then I can also like record or produce, or I can make a synth track. It doesn't matter what it is, but I still like playing tuba. I don't feel guilty about not playing bebop on tuba, anymore, which I kind of did at some point in my education.
Yeah. So can you explain what a microtonal tuba even is? I mean, what is the mechanism that makes it microtonal?
Well, firstly, the fully microtonal tuba was invented by Robin Hayward, a British tuba player who lives in Berlin, who I work with in Microtub. And to me, it's just like, I think every brass instrument should be designed like that, like his system. Because what he's done is that he's recognized that every brass instrument is inherently microtonal, in the sense that a brass instrument is a tube that you overblow, and then you blow the harmonic series with one fingering kind of. Mm-hmm. Then you depress the valve, and as you depress the valve, you get a harmonic series from that standpoint. You make the tube a bit longer because the air is passing through a bit more
different
tubing.
Tube, right? Yeah.
That's how valves work.
Right.
And for like years and years and years, tuba has been, or brass instruments has been about approximating the tempered system, the 12-tone equal tempered system, which it isn't inherently good at, because that's not how the instruments are constructed, actually. So what you end up doing is that you use your lips a lot to compensate here. I mean, if you hear like an orchestral brass section, they're fantastic at that, both at approximating piano if they have to, but also at actually like locking together in slightly more justly tuned intervals, but without kind of talking about it. But what Robin did was that he changed the valve system. And what he then did was that he added two shorter valves than the normal one. Normally on the tuba, the shortest valve, and on a trumpet, on every brass instrument, the shortest valve is the second valve, which is approximately a semitone. but Robin added one that is a quarter tone and one that is an eighth tone.
Oh, okay.
And then he added like a trigger on the main slide, which is the main tuning slide, which was the same length as the shortest valve, another eighth tone. Then from there, he kind of made every valve twice as long as the previous valve. And I mean, this is kind of, it becomes very nerdy quickly, and Robin can explain this far better than I can.
Nerdy is what we love talking about. So let's dive in.
No, isn't it? Cool. That's the best. So, but what that makes, with Robin's new system, what's so brilliant about it is that it makes the tuba able to play the tempered system more precisely. It makes it able to play almost any theoretical pitch within its range precisely. So you can play just intonation, you can play whatever, you can play maqam, you can play Indian music, you can play whatever you want to do. And you can do it with having, like, instead of having to bend notes and approximate them, you can actually have confidence in that the valve system enables you to do this.
Right.
And I just think the brilliance of it is that the tube, it's a tube, you know? Any brass instrument is basically a brass tube, so it is harmonic.
Right. I guess in my mind, I never really broke down the fact that by, the overblowing is, you're working with harmonics, and so then you're constantly kind of fighting to make them fit in the equal temperament system. But of course, That's how it works, yeah.
Yeah. So I was just like, when I had been doing tuba, like droney tuba stuff with electronics, where I was kind of, I don't know, I was very inspired by Ornam Bartsch at the time. I wanted to play these like deep droney things, and I was trying to make it interesting on, like, if you're playing a long piece and it's very minimal, it's kind of hard to, at least I found it hard for it to stay harmonically interesting. But one of the reasons for that was, of course, because all the chords and stuff I was imagining, or all the like harmonic places it could go, were in my mind back then still the tempered system, which isn't actually how, if you play like a long tuba tone, you're basically just hearing the harmonic scale, like the harmonic series. It's a very harmonic thing. It's not necessarily a piano thing. But then so I kind of abandoned that and did a lot of other stuff. I was playing techno with a friend who was doing different things. But then when I got invited into playing in Microtonal with Robin Hayward and Martin Tux and getting the microtonal tuba, it just like opened up so much more fun stuff for me. And firstly, I recommend everyone to check out Robin's invention there and read his article about the full microtonal tuba. And I think it's so weird that not more brass players are into this, aren't getting that kind of system.
Right, yeah. That is, I think maybe it's just one of those things where you get familiarity with the instrument, and then those kinds of extensions then feel like I don't know, like someone's trespassing on your property or something. I don't know.
The fingerings changed a little bit. So of course, if you have 30 years of muscle memory put into something, it is really hard to change that. But I mean, for me, it was surprisingly fast, actually. So I think people tend to underestimate how quickly we adapt to a new system on our instruments.
Now, I kind of jumped the gun and we jumped right into like how you've, your background and how you got to do what you're doing. But I am curious about the second part of that, which is, how did you begin incorporating modular synth? So the stuff that you were doing with Microtub, very clearly tuba oriented. It's this beautiful kind of droney and deep sounding things. But a lot of what you do and a lot of the work that you shared with me is very much electronic, very rhythmic. You enjoy playing with rhythms a lot. And I'm just curious, what was your entree into modular synthesis? And what is it that draws you to that while you're still a very active and kind of prolific player with the tuba?
Well, it happened during that time when I was kind of searching more for what to do with the tuba. I had started playing microtonal tuba barely, but I was getting into recording. I was getting into studio stuff. I was working a bit in a recording studio in Oslo, and me and my brother was building our recording studio at our residency for art and music in Italy, which we ran. So there was a lot of stuff happening at the same time there. And then I just decided I wanted to get a nice analog synth. And I decided that because I wanted to learn more about it, but also because I wanted to have something that people could use when they were in the studio. Because kind of I have a lot of friends who are great synth players, and having a great analog synth just brings such a beautiful warmth to a recording. And I was really lucky. Like I found on the internet in on this like used, I don't know what you call it in Norway. It's called Finn.no. It's just like where it's a marketplace, almost like eBay, but just in Norway.
Okay.
And someone was selling a Minimoog really cheaply. And I was just baffled by that. I mean, that was really weird to me. And I didn't know anything about the Minimoog. So I messaged a friend who's a synth player and was like, and I was writing like, so Minimoog, is that a good synth? And he was kind of, yeah, it's amazing. It's like this and this and this and this and this. So I drove out there, and he was like out in the countryside, and I drove out to meet him. And he was this young kid. He was like 18 or something, and he had an original, beautiful, perfect condition Minimoog in his like room. He was going to sell it, and it kind of broke my heart when I heard it, because he was going to sell it so he could afford to get a driver's license. So it's like, to me, it was just like, oh man, you have this wonderful instrument, and you basically just need a driver's license to get out of here, you know? It wasn't that it wasn't beautiful where he was, but he was probably feeling a bit cooped up with his
probably
parents.
Very isolated, right?
Yeah, you need a car when you live in the countryside. So it was kind of a necessity thing. And I almost felt I was taking advantage of the situation. But I bought it. And then what kind of clicked for me, that was the first time I felt with a synthesizer the same that I feel with the tuba. Because the Minimoog is, at least when you have like an old one, like it has a bit of personality to it, you know? Yeah. In order to start carving the sounds you're interested in, you have to kind of work it a bit, and you start playing it, and it feels like it feels in the same way to play that as it feels to play like acoustic instrument. Like with the tuba, it's so much that has to align, you know? You have your breath, you have the whatever fingering you're playing, and you have to adjust to the right amount of air goes into there, and the lips have to be coordinated, and you have to sit properly. There's all these things that goes into playing a nice coherent tone and crafting the sound you want. And the Minimoog was the first time the synth when I kind of felt a bit like that I could quite quickly get it to feel like an instrument I was playing, especially since the filter is so amazing, that filter feels incredible, and you can really like subtly work it in the same way that you do with your mouth when you're subtly changing the timbre of a tuba. So that's how I like. And then as I had that way in, all of a sudden I got really into Reactor and virtual modular synths, and I got more into and I got like a little dark energy, like a Doppler dark energy, which is I think a gateway drug for a lot of modular people.
I think so too.
And suddenly it was all opening up. And of course, as you're working with that kind of synthesis, like when you have like a low pass filter, essentially you're deciding the amount of harmonics of a note. That's how you craft and then with like the Minimoog, you have the contour button. You can kind of shape a little bit where you put the emphasis, and there, where the resonant peaks are going to be with the resonance. But you're doing kind of the same as you are with another instrument. You just have a little, it's a bit different kind of control to it. So I don't know, that kind of started it. And then another gateway drug for many, I think, is visiting Schneiderslautern in Berlin.
Yeah, I have never been, but everybody that goes there comes out with boxes and be like, well, this is my future now.
I mean, you're gonna love it. They have been really nice actually in helping me, because I wanted to get a modular system because I wanted to do some. I've been playing with tuba and effects before. I wanted to do that, but on like playing tuba into modular, because I felt that on the guitar pedal you actually don't have very high quality filters. Or I mean, it doesn't really sound that great on all those effects. Some do, but a lot of them don't. But if I could build like a modular effect unit with that kind of quality builds, then I just assumed I could do that. But as I got the system, I also just got so into synths that suddenly I wasn't really playing so much tuba into the modular. I was just starting to create this instrument, and I was so thrilled with how it can be so surprising to you, how you can change things all the time, and you suddenly have a little bit of a different configuration. And and the whole thing sounds completely different when you react to it. So actually, it's like it's an experience close to improvising with people. It gives you sort of feedback to synth as you've been patching things differently, and sometimes it reacts in unexpected ways, and you can choose.
I was going to say sometimes there's accidents that end up becoming the piece, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that felt really good to me, and I at Sneidersladen, the staff is really friendly in this Berlin friendly way. So they're really aloof and cool, but also really friendly. And one of the people there, I told him that I was into microtonality, and he showed me a module that has just changed so much for me, because there's this amazing module from some Germans, I think it's Berlin-based, from a company called tuba, and they make this quantizer that's really precise at doing microtonal tunings on analog oscillators. And it does that by listening to the output of the synthesizer and continuously retuning it.
Oh, I was going to ask you how, given your, like, really in all of your music, you have a real connection to microtonal work, but there hasn't been a lot of allowance for that in the modular world. Either you just give up on tuning completely, and you do whatever it's going to do, or you get a quantizer and you lock things into something that is generally, an equal temperament kind of version of in key, and you live with that. And so I was wondering how you could kind of like live in the gap between those two extremes.
Yeah, that's basically, you could hand tune everything one note at a time, which I did with my Minimoog at the start.
Yeah.
Or you could record, I sampled my Minimoog and built sampling synths like digitally that was tuned to different systems. But after I got that module, then it's just such a great thing, because you can change scales really quickly. You can make your own scales, or you can just listen to this database. The other day I was playing with this jazz orchestra, and I was bringing my modular to just add some like spice into the like freely improvised parts, and then I just like flicked up the module and got up to and programmed in one of Harry Partch's scale,
right?
Which is it a 42 note scale? I can't remember. It's just such a big scale, with like lots of minuscule steps, and it sounds really cool. But it was great because I didn't really have to spend that much time planning that. I could kind of, in an improvising manner, just like select it and just react to it.
So then what do you use as an input to this? Because obviously using some kind of keyboard on a 37 or 42 note scale is going to be ridiculous. It's just, there's not going to be any matchup. So do you like use a joystick? Do you just arbitrarily turn some voltages?
Well, sometimes when I'm in the studio, I just send out MIDI, like without using a keyboard, because then I've decided which pitches I want.
Oh, right.
When I was improvising with the jazz orchestra, I just used the keyboard. I mean, it was weird because you didn't have like a lot of range there at all, right. And you have no connection to which pitch you were playing. But I mean, it doesn't really matter if you're not really looking at which pitches you're playing. You can just listen and see if it fits. Kind of, you don't really have to worry about whether it's an A just because you press an A.
Sure. So I have a related question now, which is, so you are Peder, the microtonal tuba and synth player. How do you show up at a place where a jazz orchestra is playing and say, I want to sit in and play some Harry Partch scales? Is that
right.
Cool? How do you get that to happen?
Well, I mean, in this case, that was with a jazz orchestra called the Tronam Jazz Orchestra, which is a very it's a very open-minded jazz orchestra.
Okay.
So it's part of a national thing here in Norway where they're kind of like different people sitting, like playing in it all the time for different projects. They do a wide variety of things. Some stuff that are very more traditionally jazzy, and they've had projects with like a lot of American jazz greats, and then sometimes they do very much more experimental stuff. So in this case, it was a very experimental project. I think I would probably not have been invited in if it wasn't. So I think it was kind of expected of me to to do something like that anyway.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. That makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
Thanks for helping me get into that. Now, let's go back to the working with the microtub, because there's sort of details about that I'm curious about too. So that group is three players, right?
yes. It's Robin Hayward and Martin Tux and me.
Okay. How do you? It's a very curious instrumentation, and
Mm.
it's an entrancing sound.
Mm.
For those listeners that are curious about this, I'll put some notes on some Bandcamp things for y'all to listen to just get a sense of what's going on. But how do you how do you get pieces done for this? And then I'm also curious. I mean, I'm asking a lot of questions about the details. You're like seriously into microtonalism, so I'm going to pepper you with a lot of questions. How do you get stuff written for you in a way that's producible? I mean, is there a way to produce tonal scores like you would a traditional score?
Yeah,
Or
I mean,
do you have to use non-traditional scoring techniques that are
no, I mean we've basically been using Robin's scores. He's been writing most of the music that's scored that we play has been up until this point composed by Robin. And then the stuff that I showed you with more synths added, then really I've kind of made the piece in the computer
right?
after recording stuff, and it was like recorded. That's the chronic shift piece was recording in. It was recorded in this huge water reservoir in Berlin,
Yeah,
and then
I
like
saw
I
that. That
was.
sounded amazing.
Yeah, I mean the actually we were going to record a piece that we had written for that tank, that old water tank, and Robin had written a piece for it that was notated and kind of it was for a festival that we were playing there, like a site-specific music festival, curated by the label that published the record called Bohemian Drips, really lovely Berlin group. But we didn't play the piece well enough to record, like to release it, the recording of
Mm,
it, because it was new to us. And I feel with a lot of contemporary music, this is like a thing that we keep. I'm not saying doing wrong, but we don't always have time to learn the advanced music well enough that it's really communicating before we record it, because we have to tour with it. So we have to record it to be able to get gigs. And then suddenly, like after the 50th gig, then we're like
then
the
it's
piece
really
is
there.
really opening
Yeah,
up. And that's when
sure.
you should record it. But then, so, but what happened there was that the sound was just amazing. It was a mesmerizing sound in there. So the whole piece is just based on this one diet that I heard in the recording. That's just like a snippet, and which you can find that exact diet in our recording of the piece, which is called Sonic Drift and came out last year on Sofa, the label that Martin Tux runs.
Okay.
And like that diet in that room, one harmonic was just like, it was sticking out in this amazing way, or like it was emerging in almost like a laser out of the timbre of the tubas. So then I was using that one clear room harmonic to kind of design the piece around, and kind of drawing on, like, I was inspired a bit by Eliane Radig's kind of synth works, where she with the ARP 2500 gets these like subtly vibrating chords, where she's like introducing one-on-one pitch that's kind of working with the harmonics of a previous one. And so that was basically what I was doing with that piece. But with other pieces, yeah, we notate stuff. We're now going to we haven't really worked with a lot of outside composers at all. So that's also been, I mean, Robin knows tuba very well. So it's when writing for a tuba ensemble, it's natural for him to do that because he knows how tuba works.
Sure.
But we're now working with two composers this year, which will be Ellen Arkbro, a Swedish composer, and Catherine Lamb, an American composer. And they've both written pieces for us. In Kat's case, with also trombones added. It's going to be like a really big brass thing.
Wow.
And they both compose in just intonation, but they're both really great composers. So when we've been trying out or workshopping the pieces, I mean, it kind of worked straight away. They kind of got the ensemble sound. So I don't know if it is easier than we think to write for three tuba players, but I think it also just might be because they're really great at what they do and attentive composers.
That sounds amazing. It actually sounds like it would be really both challenging but enjoyable to write for that group because I'll tell you, you talked about like a lot of your work deals with space, both harmonic space and physical space. But to me, when I hear microtub in action, what it feels like is it feels like these instruments filling space, right?
Right.
There's
Right.
something about the tone and tonality of this stuff that just it has even when you're just listening to it in a set of headphones, it has a physicality to it that's really, really beautiful. And so it doesn't surprise me then that you also would have connected with the mic or the mini moog so much, because to me, the mini moog, the sound of it also has that kind of physical nature to it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, perhaps I have the same feeling with the mini moog. That it feels kind of solid, and it feels, even though you just record it into a computer, it still feels like it has a sort of gravitas and space to it
Right.
somehow.
It's really, really quite amazing. Now, in addition to working with Microtub and doing your own, in addition to working with Microtub, you also do solo work, and you have a release coming out this March called Repetitive Rhythm.
Yes.
You were nice enough to share early release of that, and it's really quite amazing. It's going to be on the Ace Tunes label. This one is really modular focused, although what I'll say is that on the page that I was looking at, it also listed a number of additional musicians on each track, and I would say that I was actually surprised because the sound of the tracks didn't make me think it was that. It made me think like it was very complicated modular setup.
Right.
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 And
Yeah.
so I think you did a lot. You must have done a lot with processing, but also a lot in the arrangement of the work to make things
Yes.
kind of like intertwine a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I was the people who are playing on this record are people from the Norwegian experimental music scene that are really fantastic musicians. So I basically had these sketches with synths that I made, and they were basically, and one with piano. And then I invited them in to kind of just play around with it. And they all have like this ability to create sounds that aren't necessarily always how their instrument would sound. They can like, they're great at extended techniques, they're great at, and they're also great at merging with other stuff. So a lot of that work was kind of done by the musicians as they were playing on the stuff I'd made. And then it was basically a matter of choosing what to keep of that. So it was like a curating their improvisations around what I'd made. In the case of the one track with Ingar Sak, then actually I was just sampling him. He wasn't really playing on the tune at all. But I love his work, and I stole this recording of him playing live. It was recorded just with like a video camera at a venue in Norway. And it had this kind of like great sound to it, the video camera, because it was kind of brittle and kind of like he's doing a lot of stuff with transducers on snare drums and bass drums, so they all like kind of resonate really beautifully, and he puts objects on top of this, so his world is kind of like not how you would normally perceive percussion, but it's really beautiful. But as we were recording it with this little camera microphone, it became kind of compressed and nice.
Super compressed, right?
Yes. Yeah. And then I just added that, and then I added my modular on top of that. So I was doing the microtonal stuff on that particular tune is actually me just hand tuning my oscillators to fit the harmonics that's going on in the resonances in his snare drum.
I see.
And for some reason, it just perfectly fit with the tune. So I was just lucky, I guess.
Well, one of the things I would say that's actually interesting too is, and this is, I would say when I listen to everything, so whether it's the chronic shift piece with Microtub or some of these pieces from Repetitive Rhythm or some of the other pieces that you've released in other circumstances, they all have one kind of similarity. which is that they start off fairly simple. I mean, you would almost hear it and say, okay, this is a minimalist work, right? But over time, it's like they reveal. It's like you reveal little pieces of the composition over time. And every bit of work that I heard of yours kind of had that nature to it. That nature of a constant revelation of something new or something enhanced or like a previous phrase extended a bit. Is that how you think about it, or do you not think about that and that's just what I happen to hear?
Well, no, I mean that's kind of precise. Actually, it's a very good analysis. You know, in the not that it's always super conscious, because sometimes I try to compose something and not judge the direction it's heading in at all, and just like let it flow and see what comes natural to me. And whenever I do that, it tends to become a bit like that. That it just does one thing for a long time, and things slowly emerge around it. But it's kind of also how I feel about a lot of topics and stuff in general, also both in music but also in life. That's kind of how. I mean, imagine when I started learning about synths. You know, I thought it was just pressing a key and you get a sound. But you know, as you're learning something about anything, it just reveals these depths that stuff has to them. And I kind of like music that has the patience to keep just like doing something with something, because it might emerge something more, and you might like give the listener or yourself, mainly myself, something more to like dive into in that, or like put something that you were originally doing in a context that makes you think differently about it. And there's so much material there in quite small gestures and phrases. So it seems weird to me to just keep adding all these like different ideas and things, because then, I mean, it's nothing wrong about that, but what you're essentially doing is that you're not kind of using your material to the maximum in a way. And to be honest, I would love to keep exploring that even more. Sometimes I love when people make music that's so minimalistic in their gestures that that process is happening within me as a listener, not so much in the music, which can be even more interesting than me growing impatient and adding something here and there. But also, yes, sometimes actually I really enjoy using some subtle, you add something subtle, because then there's like a nugget to discover there for someone who listens deeply to it. It sounds like not a lot is happening, but if you listen deeply, stuff opens up and it becomes that there's more there than meets the eye or ear at first sight, kind of.
Right. The other thing, though, too, is that the musical form you end up with then is a very linear one, as opposed to, as opposed to anything that kind of has, whether it's a verse, chorus, repetition kind of framework, or even just I would say even like in techno and other sort of like dance-oriented moves where the repetition, there's short and long form repetitions, but you're always kind of coming back. Your stuff tends to grow linearly and change. It actually sort of like morphs its shape over time, which was really funny because the first time I listened to something, I was just like super distracted. I put it on and I was listening for a moment. I was like, oh, okay, I think I get what this is. And I jumped way like 10 minutes farther in, just wondering like, how much is it going to change over 10 minutes? It sounded like a completely different song. And so then I went back and listened and I heard how things were built and some other things were taken away. And then this thing that was initially added on all of a sudden kind of became the central voice of the next thing that was going to happen. And it just ended up being this really linear flow that I found really fascinating as a compositional form.
Thanks. Yeah. I think it's because, I really like to think about composition in a way that you can both add something, but you can also just take something away is an equally big decision.
Big movement, right.
Yeah. So in some of those pieces, I have like taken one riff for one thing kind of dogmatically and just done that for a very, very long time. And I've been slowly building up stuff around it. And when I then take away that original thing, you're actually, it turns out that it's a completely different thing going on. but it's also the same because you're just keeping like this shell around the thing. So it's almost like there's a riff shaped hole there that kind of tells you what used to be going on in a way. But I don't know. I like a lot of music that has other forms and use like more verse chorus or different themes and different sections. It's just more that whenever I try to write music, it always seems to come out more as like a slow journey of emerging things. And I also really enjoy listening to music that has that sometimes. Robin writes pieces like that too. So I don't know. But since I've been working a lot in the recording studio, I sometimes work a lot with like pop musicians or different kinds of stuff that has completely different forms. And I do really enjoy that music as well. It's just that I don't really know how to write that.
Well, doing that linear stuff, is that for you, is that primarily a recording studio kind of practice? Or do you find that when you do live performances and even improvisations, that they also kind of look like that as well?
I like very much when that happens with an improvisation as well. I think when improvising, it's such a risk as a group or or I don't know how to say this in a way where I'm not sounding like there's something I don't like. I don't really like to talk about music in that way, but sometimes I will hear people improvising together, or I'll even be part of a group improvising, and it feels like we're just like throwing out thousands of ideas,
Yeah.
until we land on something where someone feels comfortable enough to do something. To me, it's more interesting if someone just does one little thing and just stays with it for a while, because then if they do it for long enough, something changes with it and something starts happening.
And other people can latch into it and
Yes.
groove off
I mean,
of it,
listen,
right?
if you listen to the Necks, for instance, that's a fantastic example of improvisers who just like stick with the theme and then slowly does small things with it.
Who is this?
The Necks, the Australian piano trio.
Oh, okay.
It's fantastic. It's like piano, bass, and drums, and they just like start playing something, and you just stick with it. And that thing is just really, really strong, because you as a listener start to be like, aren't you going to change what you're playing soon? They create this wanting and longing in you as a listener, instead of underestimating the listener and thinking that they need something new all the time. I love to improvise like that, but I guess I'm doing far less improvisation now than I used to when I was a jazz student. Mainly because, I don't know, I love sitting in the recording studio and composing and writing things. And of course, a lot of these tracks on the repetitive rhythm record is inherently improvisations. Like they're just happening and I'm recording them, and I kind of just try not to judge them, but then I kind of select the most efficient ones, or the ones I like the best.
Got it.
Composing and improvising is very much kind of the same thing in a way, You're not going to be able to compose anything that like comes from nowhere,
right? Yeah, right.
You're not going to be able to improvise anything that comes from nowhere. You can improvise something you were kind of surprised by, but then suddenly it's part of your thing and you keep reacting to it. And it's like that with composition as well. I mean, they're kind of the same thing in a way.
So unfortunately, our time is already up, but I have one more question I want to ask of you. Earlier in our discussion, you talked about a residency that you and I think your brother have in Italy. What's that about?
It's actually our family that has it. My mother owns it and runs it. She's an artist that used to work in the gallery business, and then she decided to close down her galleries and open up this old farmhouse on the countryside in Italy and make it into a residency place for artists and musicians and writers and everything. And then me and my brother, who's also a musician, we decided to create a recording studio there. So the place is called Palazzo Stabile. You can find it online, and it's a beautiful old winery turned into a residency where you have like a lot of beautiful rooms, like this old cantina under the house where they used to make wine with this really long reverb. So we built like lines down to that, and we have this big space where artists can paint, but we can also record in there. So it's kind of multifunctional rooms, and it's room for a lot of people. And there's lots of exciting stuff happening there. Like we've had great musicians, bands, and artists coming there to play and record or write. and we have like contact with interesting young Italian musicians who are around and are gonna try to help us be even more of a resource for the like Italian music community.
Wow.
And we are like also a friend of ours, some artists and musicians bought a house in the same village now, so they're also going to be involved, and a close friend who's also a music producer will be joining us in the studio and doing stuff. So there's a lot of exciting stuff coming up there.
That sounds amazing. Boy, that's incredible. What a great opportunity. Well, Peter, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and having this discussion. It's been really great to speak with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, have a good one. Many thanks to Peder for having the great discussion. As you can probably tell, I was really inspired by all the things that he opened my mind to. I want to thank you for continuing to listen, for sharing this with your friends and cohort. And if you are so interested, please help out the podcast by going over to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/DarwinGross, DarwinGrosse. With that, I'm going to let you go. We'll catch you next time around. Bye.